You want to take the lead?
Do I want to? Yeah, sure. Welcome, everybody. This is the 8th episode of State of CS. Here with Ramon Fire, Amandas, and Sam was on the other camera. It's just going to be the two of us talking about things mostly Counter-Strike related, but who knows? Could go really anywhere at this point in doing. How you doing, Sam? How are you doing? You having a good day?
Yeah, not too shabby. I was up all night talking to Monty and Thorin and Capitalist. Show eSports Salon should be coming out soon. So it was a lot of fun, but unfortunately, the nightmarish task of trying to get people who are in like 4 different time zones together for a show wound up with me being up at like 2 a.m. basically until 5 a.m. So it's a good time, man. It's a good time. I'm feeling fresh like a daisy. Morning dew.
It's actually not to derail the whole topic right off the bat, but it is actually a really odd problem that esports has. This whole time zone problem. I mean, just from a I don't want to go too deep. Just to mention that it's a weird problem that all sports share. You know, just the people working in so many different time zones, and also from an advertising point of view, it makes it a bit odd with the different geographics and everything. Yeah, what a world,
man. Hell, just with our scene, CS. Yeah. If you're going to follow North America, you're going to be up all night, basically, most of the time, right?
Is my microphone terrible today? Did I do something wrong with my microphone? I have to sort this out, obviously. Yeah, people in the chat, tell me if microphone is being odd. Then I'd love to know about it. Should be fine. All right, I'll turn down the gain a little bit on my end, and we'll see if that's going to work out.
1993 microphone quality, what?
It shouldn't be, but maybe I haven't messed with.
It's weird. It doesn't sound any different on my side for some reason. It sounds like it normally does.
Okay. Hopefully it's going to be fine. I don't know. I swear I haven't changed anything from last time, and nobody else ever goes in this room. Maybe can I adjust the gain a little bit? I don't know.
I don't think it's the end of the world. We have not bad, but not the best. Don't worry. Thank you, Rulel.
I want the best. That's the problem. All right. Hopefully this is going to be fine. We'll figure it out, guys, as we go along. But thanks for the feedback anyway. Right. So just getting back to something that is Counter-Strike related. Obviously, we just came back from Epicenter in Moscow, which is for both of us the first time that we were in Russia, and also the first time we've been working with Epicenter since I think it's the first time they've done anything in Counter-Strike, which is kind of interesting. They are obviously there's obviously some really well-established player in the Counter-Strike scene, and then suddenly we get sort of an input from the outside. And I suspect this will happen more in 17 because of the Chinese market. So we may as well get used to it. For just as an overall sort of broad strokes, but I had a really good time in Moscow. I think it was really cool.
It was super sick. It was actually, I was a little leery myself going in, but airport wasn't a problem. Infrastructure wasn't bad, apart from traffic. Like, I think Moscow could give Los Angeles a run for its money when it comes to traffic. Holy hell.
Yeah.
But, I definitely feel for the people who live in Moscow full time, because dealing with that traffic must be a goddamn nightmare if you live there every day, right? Having to drive into work, etc. So, but I think what was cool, we both got to see the metro system, which was definitely impressive to say the least. Still a lot of CCCP art, and just like a very beautiful, metro system that they have in Moscow is pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know, like this. I've been trying to sort of think of a way to phrase it so that I don't offend anyone. But it is 2016. It's really hard not to offend people, generally speaking. But basically, I had in mind when people say Russia and Moscow, I had sort of a less well kept city in mind, like a little bit more rough maybe. And it wasn't. It was beautiful and it was real nice, and you got like an instant feeling that you were in a nice place, and everyone we sort of ran into seemed to be in a good mood, or they were just minding themselves. But generally speaking, it was quite cool. And because the only Russians I know are through Counter-Strike, players and stuff like that. Haven't really met many people, sort of just regular folk, and they actually, I think the first thing that I realized was they're actually kind of funny people. Like they have a lot of humor about their own culture and their own history and stuff like that, that they don't mind sharing, especially if you talk to them just a little bit. So that's interesting. That's not, maybe it's just like Western media propaganda or something. You always get the sense that Russians like very serious, angry people or something.
Yeah.
Definitely not how it felt to me. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, this is actually one of the things I love about this job is almost everywhere I travel, it turns out all the stuff you see on TV generally doesn't match up that well, you know. The world is just a little bit different when you're there. But yeah, that was I mean, culturally outside of the Counter-Strike stuff, we'll get to that. But it was a really fun experience for me as well. So
culturally was getting to see the Kremlin, the Red Square, all of that was really fascinating as well, to be able to actually see it in person. It was a bit of a trip when you still have like all of the red stars on top of the buildings, right, with like the hammer and sickle and everything. So that was I was just like, I'm a little tripped out by that. But I mean, apart from that, it was just very beautiful. Like the architecture there's a whole variety of architecture as well. Like it's almost like it's so eclectic, right? And it feels like no two buildings are alike when you're walking through downtown. It was a real pleasant trip, I think. And obviously Epicenter took really good care of us as well, as far as just location, the hotel that the event happened in, everything was super nice, like way up there in niceness, I don't know, in comfort.
Yeah. No, I agree. It was it was definitely well worth it. And actually, just to point this out, you have one of these too, Samuel, but I have mine right next to me. We ran into a guy who wanted to meet us. He had a little printed out, a little picture of you and I, and he just wanted to come say hi. And he brought these really cool little coins that are from like the 1980s, so you guys can tell, like memorabilia for the Olympics being there. So tiny rules, really cool. So just generally fun people and a fun time was definitely had there. Now, with regards to the Counter-Strike, I would say if we have to be a little bit critical, I think there were some areas in which it was obvious that Epicenter had a lot to learn when it comes to Counter-Strike. They've obviously been in Dota before. And I think actually all new organizers who approach Counter-Strike for the first time have this experience. It seems like kind of an easy game, right? You get 5 people on one team, 5 on the other team, and you just have to spectate them and produce, some video around that to broadcast to people. But it always turns out there are lots of technical issues that you don't know about, and lots of weird things like when do you switch from a crowd shot back into the game, like all of these things. But when all that's said and done, they were, even during the show, like even the first couple of days, they were so hyped to get feedback, like from us and from the community. Like they were really into it. So I suspect this will be much improved upon if they continue to do Counter-Strike events, because they were really they were really hungry to get all that. So I think that's a good sign,
They had the resources to act on it as well. When they did get the feedback, they had the resources to instantly take the necessary steps to fix whatever problem came up. If it was possible, right? There were a couple that were not possible just due to logistics and not being able to get, hardware, for example, in time. The cough buttons, right, come to mind as something that they hadn't even considered. And so it was definitely a fun experience, because it was obvious that the production team were learning on the fly as to how to actually handle a CS tournament, which was very interesting considering they've only ever run Dota 2. And still do. It's RuHub who handled all of the production, and those guys are doing, like, I don't know, I was talking with Vlad. He says that they do like 80% of all of the online cups and tournaments and matches in the CIS language, right, or Russian, right, blah blah blah. So I mean, it was a massive learning experience, a massive undertaking for these guys, and I mean, as far as actually putting on a show, I think it was very good that. Experienced guys like, the guys on the analyst desk, Alex handled that shit like a champ. Not easy. Not easy to handle a show on the fly like that when you're used to certain kinds of structure that are present in other tournaments, right? The tournaments that we frequent more often, ESL, DreamHack, etc. They have a certain way of running their show, and that just wasn't present at all. So it was a learning experience for us as well. And like, okay, how do we actually interact with them, or how do we interact with this show? How do we make this show work? It was a lot of, kind of just flying with it. I mean, you guys saw the mozzarella stick, right? There you go.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Yeah, certainly there were some hiccups like that, and I think in spite of those things, I think the general community feedback was that people had a really good time. And I mean, obviously the stage was completely crazy, and everyone loved that. Now, about the actual Counter-Strike that was happening there, though, it was actually a remarkably stacked tournament for there not being that many teams. I think everyone immediately pointed out and looked at Hellraisers and said, those guys are definitely going to get fucked. But then it's the whole tournament was still nuts. Hellraisers played very well. They couldn't make it through the group, but they put up a really good fight against not just a couple of teams, but it was really, really interesting. And then obviously the massive surprise of Dignitas winning the whole thing. So where do we start off? What was the biggest surprise for you in that tournament? Was there any was the one point you said, wow, this I did not see coming?
Ooh. I think one of the biggest for me was just how fucking close the groups were. I think that was it. I think I was expecting there to be, some clear-cut favorites who were going to go through 2-0, 2-0, 2-0 in their matches, be very, very, clear-cut in first seed, and then after that it was going to kind of fall into place behind and maybe turn into a knife fight there. What I wasn't expecting was Group A, everybody splitting 2-2, right? Or 1-1 in every match. I think that was one of my biggest shocks coming into it, is just how even things were in terms of the current level for the top teams. And I guess the second biggest surprise, obviously, is the Cinderella story of Dignitas. I mean, there's a lesson for you. Never underestimate anybody, because I think the Dignitas, they qualified for the tournament. They were not invited, and they managed to take the fight to the best in the world and come out ahead, and actually win a massive title. That's got to be a surprise for everybody, I think, including themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's odd because you're talking about the group stage, and I actually thought at some games during the group stage they looked like they had problems that they could not fix, and that were gonna be the end of them when they were playing teams like VP or Navi or something. I felt like that's gonna be the end of it if they keep leaving themselves hanging, especially some players like I think Config is the one we keep talking about. Maze does it every once in a while too, but this whole idea of being overly aggressive, and I thought for sure some of the bigger teams would be able to punish that. Sometimes they were, but not. It's sort of the calibration between those two things was that they managed to do more damage than they eventually took when they did fall. Which is kind of impressive. That is not easy, and I suspect. I mean, I'm going to make a prediction here. That is not a play style that either one of those two players will be able to maintain forever. They will go through exactly the same kind of up and down roller coaster that JW did at some point, where if at some point, he could just roam all over the place, run through smoke, kill people, do that thing. And it works for a while, but it's so confidence based. And eventually people, when they play you, they become even more paranoid and they start to worry about it. And maybe they watch your plays even more and they start to figure out exactly what you're doing. So I think I still think they will be top level players because they were obviously very good. But I think that exactly what we saw at Epicenter will become more rare, and it will be punished more severely in future tournaments. So but that's interesting. That's what I love about following people's careers. You could get a chance to see that kind of of progression. So overall, just a crazy display for Dignitas. Who knew when we were all looking at Astralis, obviously still going to win the major, of course, but we were looking for them to do the whole thing in the Danish scene. And now it's so chaotic.
The memes.
Don't know what to say.
I mean, that is kind of the case, though. I mean, it's a good point that you bring up that they aren't going to be able to be so aggressive, because the general feeling in the after party, right, talking to the players was, well, we weren't expecting that, but they're never going to do that again. We're never going to allow them to play like that again against us. Now we know. We underestimated, fair enough. We underestimated them, but now we know. And so now begins the true test that other dominant teams in the past have shown that they're capable of evolving and changing their game to stay on top. I mean, obviously, SK, Fnatic, etc. in the past don't know yet. I don't think anybody knows yet if Dignitas have that caliber roster, that caliber player where it's strength across 5 players, right? There isn't a weak link. I don't know if we have that yet with Dignitas. Certainly Cajun has the chops, right? And Config and Magisk Boy. But I still think there's a lot of eyes on MSL and Rubino as far as, are they going to be able to hit that level that allows for a team to just crush, right? And stay on top. That's all eyes are on them now. So there's a little bit of additional pressure going into it for their future tournaments, right?
That is definitely true. And I mean, the good thing is, I suppose, some teams when they have this kind of breakthrough, it becomes a sort of a bracket question, where you say, okay, they beat one good team, but then the rest of the bracket was really easy, and they sort of got gifted the tournament. They did beat Navi and then VP, so the test is kind of complete in that sense. Like there are not that many other teams out there you would really have to beat to say that you've made it the full way, right? So that's just very exciting, I feel like.
I mean, they still beat Fnatic as well in the quarters. We have to.
They did also.
It's not a full strength Fnatic, obviously, but I mean, it's not like Twist and Dennis and Olaf let them have it easy either, right? They had to fight tooth and nail for that match.
Yeah, Minty's asking in the chat, if Dignitas, VP were unprepared, and maybe they were expecting Navi to go through, like they had put all their work into that. I mean, that is a theory, but I feel like Dignitas, everyone has seen them coming for a long time. It's not like they were off the radar and then suddenly, boom, they're back into it. It's more like they were just sort of slowly climbing the mountain, and then this was just a tournament where everything seemed to really peak for them. So I feel like even if VP thought we're going to face Navi in the finals, they should have still known a little bit more, especially because the way that they got there, Dignitas was for playing sort of very fundamental Counter-Strike. There wasn't anything like absurd, flashy, like, oh, we've never seen this strat ever before. It was more like just fundamental Counter-Strike that worked really well. So I feel like they should have been prepared enough that they should have been able to make it work. And I mean, for one map they did, but then I don't know what happened, man. I honestly, this does. It worries me a bit if we're going to switch to VP, because you saw at the end of that we had like the camera shot of the VP team after the second map, and they looked so destroyed. They looked like they had just given up on life altogether, and I really don't want to see that, especially not from VP. So I don't know what that was. Hard to say.
Let me see here. I wanted to find the ratings. I know, ratings, take it with a grain of salt, but this tournament, one of the standout things about this tournament as well is that it was the maximum number of maps possible played all tournament long. And I think Dignitas had 15 maps played by the end of it, right? That's a grind. Yeah. And so between them and VP, right, they really went the distance. It turned into like an all rounds kind of boxing match where they're just slugging at each other. And that's what is going to speak to Config and Megas, that they were able to finally, I think, show the level that we kind of saw like a glimmer of a year ago, right?
Yeah.
With Fragmite Masters and Megas Boy, DreamHack London with Config, where it's just like, okay, this is really these guys can be really interesting, right? And then obviously they had to go through that whole period of learning how to play at a top level and finally make that grind happen for themselves. And here we are where they play 15 maps through a tournament and they're both like 120, 130 or something nuts, right? Like rating wise, that's some fucking staying power. That is crazy. So I don't know if I fully agree with Duncan yet, because he obviously tweeted afterwards, right, where he's like, Megas Boy is I mean, I do agree that Dignitas are now an elite team. Yes, they're definitely a team that you're gonna have to watch out for. I don't quite know if Megas is up there with like with the top 5 boys just yet though. So
I think personally I just want to see it happen a couple of more times. I mean, I know that sounds kind of rough, because like we said, they just beat some really good teams, but and I do kind of foresee a future in which a lot of the playstyle that they're putting up will have to change anyway. But I think they're good enough to do it. I just kind of want to see it, So that's just where I'm at with it.
How concerned are we about NIP? I mean, because again, I was looking at the ratings page yesterday, all the players who competed in the tournament, and just a shocking level, I think, was shown by some of the players in NIP this tournament. I think Get Right and Freiburg were the only guys who were positive out of the team coming out of it, and Freiburg had a fantastic tournament. He actually did step up in a big way, but Forrest and Exist again just disappeared when the team needed him. So I mean, that overpass map where they just got their heads banged in by Na'Vi. What did we end at the first half again for Forrest? Like 3 kills or something at the end of the first half? It was just...
Yeah. But I mean, Henry was telling me that if at any time they wants to win, they just have to, like, Freiburg just has to want to win, and then that's it, they'll win. So I guess, that was Henry. That was Henry's analysis, which I kind of appreciate.
I suppose that's fair. He certainly tried. I mean...
He did. I mean, I don't know. I feel like this is such an odd place for NIP to be in. Like, literally since they swapped Michael, like since they got rid of Fiflaren, it seems like they have just been like every time they've made a choice to pick up someone new, there's been like some odd problem that means that they can't keep that person around, you know? Obviously the horror scenario happened right around when they had to go to E-League.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Pith couldn't make it, and obviously now there's the whole I think thankfully not surgery, which is I think fortunate. But you know there just seems to be these weird issues that pop up. And like without making too many excuses for them, they seem to be in a situation where they have a very hard time locking down a complete 5-man roster that will just stick with them for a year or something. You know, which I mean they are a team that had that Fiflaren lineup for a very long time, right? So you can kind of understand why maybe they would want to find something like that to work off of again, and they're just not finding it. So I don't know. I think Michael
doesn't even get any better because Pyth just announced that, hey, I don't need surgery. I'm working to get back. So it feels like things have just got sped up on Nip again, where they're finally hitting their stride with Michael, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, you might be changing again, boys, in like a month. So
yeah. I mean, this is so weird, isn't it? Whenever this happens, whenever you get a situation where you use a stand-in and then that stand-in proves to be really good, it's got to create like a weird fracture in the team. You know, even if everybody knows that, you know, the sort of the real lineup is going to be assembled and back together again and everyone is sort of ready for it, it must still feel a bit odd being on the sidelines and seeing this is what happened to Kuster at one point, right? When they played with Simple instead because he couldn't play at the major. That's right, then... Yeah, suddenly Simple is there, and he's obviously wrecking everybody. And then Kuster is playing, and people are like, well, Kuster's not really living up to the hype. It's just got to create some really weird internal issues in the team, because at the end of the day, all these people are just, you know, regular people as well. So, of course, they get affected by how their own performance is compared to the guy that was just in, and all of these other things, especially when the community, as people tend to do, go a little bit crazy and you know, make 100 threads on Reddit that say, you know, pick this guy up instead, and just keep this guy and throw someone else out there. So I don't know. I guess at some point what it comes down to, because this is not just a social club, right? This is a professional team. So at some point there's got to be some leadership where someone steps up and says, look, whatever you may feel about it, this is the plan, and we're gonna go with it, and we're gonna, you know, here's a timeline for when it's supposed to be working. If it isn't working by then we'll have to make adjustments, but let's just go with it right now. You know, there's got to be some leadership. It can't just be people's own sort of, you know, feelings or opinions about what's working and not working. So I feel like that's maybe lacking right now.
Excuse me. I agree, especially seeing as how when it felt like when Nip got to crunch time again, there wasn't that standout performance from Forrest to lead the way, right? And it still feels like there is that lack of leadership on the team, especially the fact that Threat is off doing he's like dealing with school or something, so he couldn't make the tournament. And so he was kind of like remote analyzing, just sending in his analysis before, post-match, pre-match. But still, it feels like live in the heat of it, they don't have somebody who's just going to grab them by the necks and say, right, you know, by the scruff of the necks, right, and shake them and say, like, let's go. We got to, like a Fallen or somebody like that. They don't have, it still doesn't feel like they have anybody like that. And I almost feel like it's not the firepower that they're lacking. It's the leadership that they really just don't have anybody to really take the reins and say, it's time to get the fuck up and go and get it done, right? And it feels like that's been the problem, I think, for quite some time. Like definitely. Definitely curious to see how they'll ever resolve the issue, or if it's just going to continue being this like seeping wound that they're never really just going to bandage.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about as well. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for Threat in this sense, and I think the players do too. And I think even if he can't do live coaching, I would still consider him quite a valuable asset for any team to have picked up. Maybe especially this NIP team, just given the history between the Threat and the existing Get Right and Forest. So I don't know. I feel like that's something that's going to have to play itself out. But you got to hope that's not the case, right? Because they're obviously, I mean, I still think Forest and Get Right in particular are sort of like world-class players. I just think they haven't shown it. I mean, they have shown it for a couple of times, but, you know, consistently throughout the whole range of a tournament, you know, and I think that's going to happen again. So I won't say I'm not scared, but I remain hopeful, put it like that. Ever the optimist. All right, there's a guy in the chat, just because we're sort of like just talking about everything now. There's a guy in the chat called PewStream who's been asking and is now getting a little bit, a little bit angry that we're not answering the questions. So we'll try and do that about casting in general and about who gets to do what at different tournaments. I have talked a little bit about this on Reddit, but I don't suspect everyone reads all Reddit threads. I certainly hope not that go on. So basically. For especially in the beginning, what would happen a lot when the topic came up, like who's going to be doing the semifinals and grand finals and all these things, all of the organizers tend to ask the casters for some odd reason and say, who do you think should be doing what? Which is obviously a very bad way of doing things. It should not be a caster's decision. It shouldn't be a talent decision. It should be the people organizing the tournament. There's always a product manager. There's always a someone who's in charge of production or whatever, like a producer or anything, or a director, anybody like that who has an idea about what kind of tournament they want, and those people should make that decision. Now they can factor in whatever they feel into that decision, like who does the community want, or who do they want personally, whatever. Like whatever criteria they use is kind of there to use. That should be your privilege when you make a tournament. The problem is if you make it a talent decision, then that causes a lot of really weird shit to happen. Basically, for one thing, it partly sort of allows for people to use that position. If they come to Semler and I and say, hey, do you guys want to do the grand finals? And we just say yes every time, that means nobody else is ever going to do it. And that means suddenly our relationship with, just to mention sort of the top of them, obviously with Henry and Sato, with Dan and James, whoever else they might be out there, then that's going to be ruined after a very short time. So we've purposely never engaged in that. It was a bit different for this Epicenter one because Epicenter were like, please, there's only 4 of you. Can't you just figure it out between us? And we did, and the way we did it in a really boring way. I kind of wish there was more drama involved in it because they would obviously make for way better, content for this particular show.
Which day we were talking about the finals, the quarterfinals?
Yeah, just the finals. Actually,
the quarterfinals was pretty funny too. Like how we sorted out who actually casted what there.
Yeah, that was obviously just a coin flip, right? So literally in the lobby, someone flipped a coin, and then that was it. For the group stage, it was Semler was in charge of everything. For the group stage, it was decided by the fact that Sato had to go to the Brazilian embassy in the morning. So that meant all the morning games were done by Semler and I. And then they would take the last 4 games of the day because then Sato wouldn't be at the Brazilian embassy anymore. So that was even less interesting. And for the finals day, we kind of just decided to go with, how about we each do a semifinal, and then whoever gets the least exciting semifinal could do the grand final. And then, as it happened, Sadokist had a flight at like 2 a.m, I think. Yeah. Which resulted in him sort of saying, "Well, look, that's fine, but I'll go back and pack, and we'll see what happens." And so he just kind of did that, and that's how it worked out. Like there was really, it was. I know this sounds terribly boring. It's so boring we shouldn't even be telling the story, but that is basically what it is. I suspect if we're in this position again, we will probably just swap it around so that Sato and Henry do a semifinal and a grand final, and then Semler and I would do the other one.
The thing is it is almost a discussion now, just because there are so many tournaments that finals don't even really mean that much anymore. So when it comes to the commentators, right, because we're traveling from so many different tournament to tournament, that this one was almost just like a discussion. Henry and I were at dinner, right, talking it over, like, okay, how are we going to do this if they're not going to take responsibility and actually, make the call for their show? How do we sort it out? And it was almost like, well, we're going to be at Sao Paulo next week, so, go ahead, right? It's just like, yeah, okay.
And
addressing his point on whether do we feel pressured into improving ourselves or anything like that. The thing is that if you ever stop moving, if you ever stop trying to improve, whether there's pressure on you or not, or whether there's competition or not, well then, that's when anything interesting with your life ends, basically. So that's when atrophy sets in, and that's when you don't progress. And so to be a commentator, I think you have to be self-driven at all times, regardless of whether there's people behind you poking you with a stick, right? So to answer your question, no, don't feel any pressure whatsoever. Would continue doing what we do regardless of whether there are people in the scene or not, or other commentators in the scene or not. And actually, I'm quite pleased that there are competent commentators now where there's multiple pairs, given how many tournaments there are. It does it like if Anders and I, for example, hypothetically, right? If Anders and I, if we were the only commentators who were deemed worthy of a finals and we miss a tournament, what happens for that tournament, right?
Yeah.
So
take Sao Paulo for an instance, right?
Yeah, there you go.
How terrible would it be for the Counter-Strike scene as a whole if everyone was like, well, Anders and Sam are on there. In that case, I'm not going to watch the tournament. Whereas obviously they've got a great lineup of casters, and I am quite confident that as soon as the show starts, people will just enjoy it, that's
Exactly.
good. That's really important because otherwise, I mean, if Sam and I can't do that many more tournaments than we're doing right now, it'll put it like this: if you look at it the reverse way. If there were only enough games that Sandra and I could cover everything and we would never need any other commentators than just like, 2 analysts and 2 casters, that would mean the Counter-Strike world would be a very small one and it would be sort of very sad for all of us.
Exactly.
So it's a sign of a really healthy situation. But yeah, I mean, I think what can happen, since we're talking about this, let's just talk about this. What can happen at some tournaments, and I know almost everyone I think has experienced this at one point or another at different sort of volumes, where you can for nobody's fault, just because of like random chance, you can have a tournament where you end up with very many bad games, and it's just random. Even the games that are supposed to be good on paper could sometimes be really bad. So you have a horrible group stage, and then you turn up in the quarterfinals, and it's a 2-0 with one team winning 16-6 every time, and you just think this is terrible. I can't get out of this. I'm at a cool tournament, but as a commentator, I'm not getting any chance to really show what I can do. I want that close overtime game. I want the exciting game where the home crowd is cheering for a big team or something. Everybody obviously would like to cast a game like that because it is so much fun, and it's you get to show the best version of yourself when you're doing that. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And I think I think in the beginning I know I was a little bit blind to it, and I don't know if everyone else was, but I was a little bit blind to it. So whenever people would get a little bit sort of upset and a little bit, in a bad mood because of it, I always thought, wow, why is he being such a dick? We're all just here having fun, right? And only later did I realize, oh, it's because actually he's had just terrible games and has had no chance. And that I sadly only realized this when it happened to me at some point. And I thought, fuck, I'm having a terrible time this event. I mean, I'm kind of glad to be at the event, but I'm getting all the bad games. So I think in that sense, I would say the whole community of casters has sort of learned stuff progressively, and to just try and be, I guess, just like to try and understand each other a little bit better in that sense. So yeah, I don't know. I think we're moving in a good direction in that sense. I can't obviously speak for everybody else, but that's how it looks from where I'm sitting.
Well, I almost feel like we're unique from a casting perspective on like how close the commentators are in CS:GO. How they're just feels like we've developed good friendships with everybody, and that there is like a real group, and there is that feeling of a group and not leaving anybody hanging or trying to help each other, that sort of thing that I don't know if frankly I don't know if other scenes. My brief stint in StarCraft 2, for example, it felt a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more each one watches back and you're on your own. I don't think that we have that really in CSGO. I feel like it's been much more open and a lot more fun to be a part of because of that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's in a good place. We have an abundance of tournaments, which allows for everybody to have work, right? Which is fantastic. There is no need for backstabbing or drama or anything because there's just so much work. And so, if you're secure and if you're making money, you're not going to be highly motivated to try and start shit.
No, I think that is pretty much what sums it up there. So I hope that answers your question. Pew, I think that was the one guy asking the question, so I hope that pretty much covered it.
Hey, Red Eye. Is more clicky like is clicky like a negative thing or a positive thing? I mean, clicky, as far as I understand, is more like group, like tight knit.
Oh, group. Well, I mean that could be true in the sense that obviously you and I, and there's Sato and Henry, and there's Dan and James, but I feel like for the most part, this is something that really matters to me. Like, here's how I judge how well I get along with other people. Just from a sort of a time point, I want to show up, and if I meet someone at an airport, some of those people that I work with in an airport or in a hotel lobby or something, do I am I happy to see them, or do I secretly think, oh, now I've got to spend time with this guy? And I really feel like I can sort of confidently say that's my reaction. I feel like, yes, I'm getting a chance to catch up on something with some people that I consider friends. And that really matters to me. Like I had this, there was sort of an epiphany I had at 3 a.m. one time or something. I thought this is actually part of the quality of the work that we do, is that we have this sort of relationship in general. But that doesn't obviously mean that there are obviously some people you get along with better than others and all that stuff. But I can't think of anyone where I think this is horrible. I don't want to meet this person ever again. Please just get me out of here. So yeah, I think we're fortunate in that sense. I don't know if we can continue this topic for too much longer, just because I feel like it's gonna make more sense to us than it does to anyone watching, and I'm not even sure if it's that interesting. But please, if you have any more questions about it, then ask them, and we'll do our best to follow up on it if it becomes relevant. I feel like, Chris, we talked about
well, majors are completely different. Majors is a competition. That's the highest point, or the high point of the year. When it comes to a major finals, you're not going to obviously do not take what I'm saying out of context or misconstrue what I'm trying to say. If we're talking even tournaments, then yeah, sure, pass them around. But for a major, there's definitely competition on who's going to cast the finals.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously something. Actually, this is. I have to say something in this context that I think people need to keep in mind. It is actually very often in Counter-Strike that the finals are the worst games compared to the semifinals.
Yeah, that's the other thing, though.
This happened both in Cologne last time and in Columbus, where Semler and I did both those finals, and at least I think both times. And in Cologne, certainly both the semifinals were better than the finals. And in Columbus...
In Columbus as well, yeah.
I think the same thing. So that doesn't mean, obviously, that... I mean, there's no way to know that, right? So you can't, say with hindsight that, oh, I wish I could have done a semifinals. That doesn't make any sense. And it's still cool to be doing a finals, obviously. But sometimes I think, it gets taken a little bit out of context, You feel like, yeah, sure, we did the finals, but the semifinal game was obviously way better. So that's actually another reason why it doesn't make much sense to fight too hard over those games, because you can't know which would be the better game. So
yeah, that's kind of rule of thumb.
Yeah, you could be starting a massive fight with, your colleagues, and then for no reason at all, you could be swapping out of a really good game and into a really bad one, even though on paper it looks like it's supposed to be the other way around. So, yeah, it's kind of a complicated issue, and obviously hopefully there will be some degree of fairness in it over time. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I would say, except for Epicenter, it is not a decision that Semler and I ever get to make. And whenever we're asked, we opt out of it. So we can't prove that, but if you know anyone, then ask anyone. I'm sure they will tell you that's pretty much how it works. So just tweet at ESL or somebody else, and they should be able to confirm it. I feel like that's an important rule. I think a lot would break down if it didn't work out like that. Let's put it like that.
And that is actually one of the points, Y2K, that you have to wonder about when you're casters, and that comes down to the director of the show, the producer of the show, the man who's putting it together. That can also be one of the angles that he tries to work. He's going to put a strong pair of commentators on a weak game in hopes of balancing it out. If it's just a 16-0 stomp, that's not really going to keep a lot of viewers interested, because they're just watching one team get the shit kicked out of them. But if you have a solid pair of commentators, you can try and make it a bit more interesting. Perhaps you retain more viewership, and that's another angle to think about. When you're a producer or a director, right? Like how to use your casters and how to actually. There's a lot of layers to it. Obviously, if we want to get into the politics of commentary and show running and all that. But yeah. And also a couple of people now have asked about Stuart or Tosspot, right? And why he isn't casting. Same with Fifth. Both of them work with Twitch. And both of them have an enormous amount of work, as far as I know, with Twitch. And so Stuart hasn't been like a commentator for like full-time commentator for ages now, because he's been working with Twitch for several years now, and he's quite high up there. And
can we call him a corporate shill on the right here on the? I hope he watches.
I was gonna get around that, but
that would be funny. I would not be surprised if we saw Tosspot pop up for an event at one time or another. He's obviously got a unique style that really cannot be replicated. So why not? I don't see. I hope we'll see Flaren more as well, because I still think he's one of the funniest people around. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
What Donut brings up an interesting point that I always like to try and think about as well when it comes to player commentators, right?
Right.
This is where like you can have like what you need for a player commentator to be effective is basically for him to be like it's like you have certain ones like Sean Gares, like Hiko, who can do it because they're comfortable in front of a camera, because they know how to carry a conversation, they know how to get their points across cleanly, concisely, right? And that's actually a rare quality. So I'm not a huge fan when it comes to player commentators, just because sometimes I feel like it detracts from the show when you have a player who isn't necessarily very comfortable on camera or isn't very good at getting his points across. Even if he has the information, he doesn't know how he wants to express it. Sometimes I feel like that actually hurts more than helps the stream, because it can mess with the flow of the rest of the desk. It can mess with just the feel of it. That being said, there are guys like Sponge who are super solid at it, like Fifth, super solid at it. Dazed is actually one of the more up to date guys. It seems interesting to me because he's still playing FPL and all that, and he's obviously ex in-game leader. Sponge, ex in-game leader. That guys that had their finger on the pulse when it came to the meta. Now that's one thing that's really hard to maintain if you're a player who's now moving into commentary analysis, is that then I think you have to start falling back on the core concepts of how you played the game and how you led your team, which is kind of, well, I mean, not that Fifth was leading. Well, he did lead it for a little bit, but that was one of the, talking with him, that was one of the struggles that he faced when he retired and then started doing some commentary, was that he started to lose some of the meta, the threads of the meta, right? And some of the things that you only pick up when you're scrimming every day and things like that, right? Those details. And so he started to have to go for more like the broader things. And that's the thing with it's almost like there's a shelf life. You're going to be up there for that long with that fresh knowledge, and then you're going to have to start falling back on broader and broader topics, just because you're going to start losing those very small details. But I mean, I still think that it's not even like a player. It's just like, okay, can you carry yourself on camera and can you be entertaining, and then it works, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just to
there's no chance.
Just to point out as well, there is obviously, I mean, YNK and Moses, for instance, are also people who come from a Natu as well. If you want to, point that out, are people who have been obviously players at a high level. So I think it is just that question. Some people may have a lot of knowledge, but may not be very good at communicating it to other people, and some people are just better at that. And there's probably you can probably bridge some of that gap with training and learning about things, and some of it you can't. It's just like a natural thing. So who knows? I think it's just important to not put people into an uncomfortable situation, because you're right, that does kind of affect the show if you have people who are a little bit weird on camera or something like that.
Yeah.
So, do we want to talk about Astralis and Glaive and just the general mess that is the Danish Counter-Strike scene?
I feel like you might have more insight than I do into this one.
So
being Danish and whatnot, I don't know if that gives you an edge here.
No, I've started to secretly hate all of them. So I'm slowly, no, not really, but it is, to me, it's really odd, because the Danish scene churns out quite a bit of talent, that comes up out of nowhere. Yeah, Valde, Magisk Boy, obviously, Config as well. And there might even be like a couple of other people who are sort of slowly creeping in, right? But Carrigan obviously goes and joins FaZe, and then Glaive steps in. Glaive, who used to be, I think, one of the strongest in-game leaders in Denmark back in the day, in 2013, back when it was basically him and Fetish, and nobody thought of Carrigan as sort of any kind of in-game leader, really. So there's just been a lot of sort of, switching back and forth. MSL, I mean, he was an in-game leader, but he was like, I don't know, he just had this weird team going on with Pimp and Nilla that nobody really cared about. So generally speaking, I would say, given all that talent and given the abundance of sort of potential in-game leaders, you got Glaive, you got Carrigan, you've got MSL, all of them seem to be very good. You even have, I would still say, Fetish out there somewhere. Even if you're not going to pick him up as a player, you could just probably pick him as a coach, and he could do a lot for your team. Almost certainly. You have all these people and all this new fresh talent, and yet, I mean, apart from Dignitas doing really well, obviously there should be like a a Danish superstar team that was like a contender to make almost every finals of every major, at least every semifinal or something, and that doesn't seem to be happening, which makes me wonder if there's still too much bullshit going on, too many people whining and complaining about things, and not really being focused on that, but just being focused on petty personal issues and stuff like that. I don't know. I get the feeling that there's something more going on than just how good people are at Counter-Strike. So,
just to take a quick step back again, there was an interesting question there about Australian casters.
Go on.
And I think that this applies to any commentators who are not located in the central area of their game, like the heart of their game. This is the reason why I moved to Europe, to Scandinavia to begin with 5 years ago, was to get closer to the different esports scenes, because one of the major hurdles, and this is always going to be a major hurdle, is just when it comes to logistics, if they have to pay your fee basically in flight costs to get you to an event, or they can have somebody who's local and who's going to cost them a fraction of that price, that person who's local is much more attractive. And so in a TO's eyes, right? And so when it comes to the Australian commentators, yeah, they bust their ass and they're definitely devoted. But I think it's going to be real tough for them to make that leap to come over to it'll be like just every now and again, just because of the prohibitive cost in getting them to an event in time and money. So yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, the thing is, at that point where it's like, do they really just focus on making their scene grow and ensuring work for themselves through that, rather than trying to focus on the rest, unless they're willing, like Sponge, to really relocate and pick up? Because the only reason we see so much of Sponge is he's been moved to Cologne to handle Pro League, right, by ESL, who are paying for an apartment for him, right? If they had to fly him back and forth from Australia all the time, it just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't be possible. So it's something to consider when you see international commentators who are located around the world, and why they aren't attending more events.
I think that's a fair point. Yeah, definitely. Why is Australia so far away from the rest of the world?
Fucking A, dude. Sponge, like, talking to him, it's just like, how did you ever compete ever? It's like 30 hours of travel to get anywhere. It seems like you're in a black hole somewhere you have to fight your way out of for half the trip before you can make a normally timed international flight.
Can't we start like digging pieces of Australia from the south towards the north and just slowly move the country further towards the rest of the world?
Aren't they actually? Isn't like Australia one of the fastest moving continents right now? I thought I read that somewhere, that they're actually moving relative to other continents, obviously, pretty goddamn fast.
Yeah, but I feel like that's still a force that works on like hundred thousands of years or more than that, like geological time. I think we need now. We need to make an active effort here to do something. Can't just wait long for esports, obviously, for the sake of esports. Just make sure that it works out. Would love to go to Australia. Never been there, but we'll see.
Even though everything wants to kill you there.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm scared of spiders a lot, so maybe not after all. We'll see. So seriously though, what do you think? Do you think that that Dignitas can keep on to two players like Magisk and Config? Is that a realistic proposal, given how good they obviously are, and given the fact that there is a team like Astralis out there, and maybe others too? Who knows? You can snipe players out of their contracts if you have enough money for it.
Sure, you can. I think that MSL would be insane to give him up, though. I mean, yes, okay, Kjærby can definitely hit hard, but it's almost a question of bringing Kjærby in to fill in Rubino's role or something along those lines. Like giving up Config or Magisk, I think, would be a massive mistake for MSL. And I don't think that Astralis have a whole lot going for them, unless it is like the NIP factor where players are tempted just because of the names that are involved, where it's like, oh, like up-and-coming Swedish players, they'll do anything to get on NIP because they're going to play with Get Right and Forest. Is it a similar situation for Astralis where they're going to think, oh, well, it's Device and everybody else. I got to play with them. They're the best, right? Except that, right, I mean, I think that they've lost that now. Astralis completely lost that, like almost irrevocably lost that, until they actually win something, just because of how hard they've struggled for so long without getting anywhere. I don't think that anybody is looking in the Danish scene is looking to Astralis as like the next place to move up, unless I suppose you're tricked or something. You're like not like the team, not actually tricked, but where Nico came from. Right now that he's on Heroic to replace Glaive, If you're in like a tier 2 team moving up to Astralis, sure. But if you're Dignitas right now, I think it's a massive move down for you. So
Yeah,
at
that's.
least if
I mean,
yeah.
from the outside, it kind of looks like that, you know. But then, how real is that? Like, this is the problem whenever you talk to players, they always have really odd perceptions of what would make sort of good teams, and it's because they obviously have personal relationships, so they have like a better understanding, I suppose, of how they would work together with somebody else, right? But yeah, if you talk about Magus, config, and device on one team, that obviously on the face of it, that seems really scary, right? It seems like a powerful force. But I don't think there's any way to make sure that those three players would all play their A game if they were in the same team. It's perfectly possible that some of them would be stepping on each other's toes, and then one or both or all three would suddenly be playing much worse. Like, I think if you think about it, the Dupree device combination was one of the sort of the most terrifying in the world at one point. And there's no reason why it can't be again, except for the fact that there's obviously some issue of chemistry between those five players. Now, I'm curious if I'm curious if Glaive can make a difference. I always thought Carrigan was not maybe necessarily the world's most brilliant tactician, but I felt he was like a very sort of like a decent leader. I felt like he would speak his mind and tell people to shut up when they needed to be told that, and tell people to move on when they needed to be told that, and sort of just generally keep his troops under wraps. I think Glaive,
only so much you can do, though. You know what I mean?
Only so much you can do, right? And that's the problem, right? And especially because what may seem like good leadership to some people, if they start to feel like they're having like a personal disagreement with someone, it's not going to seem like leadership. It's going to seem like this guy is being a dick, and I'm not going to listen to anything he says. I might actually have to pretend that I'm not really going to take it too seriously. I think Glaive from 3 years ago was, I think, maybe a little bit, as far as I can tell, just from the outside, maybe a little bit too interested in engaging with arguments, and sort of there was too much like arguing going on in his teams, whereas I feel like now, and I have this partly from talking to MSL as well, is that because I talked to MSL about some of his teams, the early teams with Pimp and Niller, and how much stupid infighting there was in those teams, and he sort of made a decent point that I hadn't thought about. He said, yeah, but we were all 17 at the time, we were just kids, and now you do grow up quite a bit in 3 years, especially when you're playing, at some pretty high stakes here, and you want to sort of be competitive and everything. At some point, you just have to leave all the childish shit behind you and just move forward, right? And I could see a world in which Glaive, especially because he's been way out in the sticks in Danish Counter-Strike, that can help players sometimes to get back into it. So I'm kind of hoping that he's going to be the sort of leader that will change the chemistry of the team a little bit and allow for the rest of them to function. Because obviously in the firepower department, they have so much, right? They have a lot to work with.
What I wonder is whether he's going to be able to lead. Because he might be a little rusty on that front, considering he wasn't the in-game leader for Heroic when he was on it. So I'm curious. I'm curious. I'm wondering if he's been having the conversations, if he's kind of like said, wait, I still have this system that I think can work, or one that I've been working on while not in-game leading, but I'm still putting thought into it. I mean, there's got to be some kind of point if you're going to swap out Kerrigan for Glaive. It's just you have to wonder. I guess they're going off of the major, right? And they're just thinking to themselves, he played. We clicked at the major. He did really well. Overperformed, I think, for a stand-in. Is fair to say. I don't think that anybody was expecting like a big performance out of him, just coming into the team last minute to stand in for the major.
True.
And he stepped up big in a big way, and that's probably what Astralis is looking at. What I'm wondering though is whether just changing one player is enough. Because when teams like struggle like this, it's almost like the NIP scenario, right? Where you're still keeping that core four and then swapping out one player. Is changing that one player enough to change the rest of the core? Or is it not enough of an impact if that guy's going to get shouted down every time he raises his voice, even if he is the in-game leader? Is that enough? Or do they need to change up more? Is it possible for them to... I don't know. Yeah. Is it possible for them to pick somebody up from Dignitas somehow through some like black magic ritual? They're able to get somebody to leave Dignitas for Astralis. If that were to happen, then maybe.
I would say if this move with Glaive doesn't work out, then maybe it's time to consider that the problem is with the core.
Yes.
And then who knows? I mean, at that point, all bets are off, right? You can, I mean, then you're talking about rebuilding the team more or less. So I don't really know about that. Look, we've gone over an hour now, and I really, really don't want to finish this before we get a chance to at least talk about Oakland a little bit, if you don't mind, because both of us are going to be there. Mm-hmm. That much is public. I hope you guys are going to make it there as well. We do actually have a link for you guys if you're interested in buying tickets. If you haven't already, I'll put it in the chat and you guys can check it out. And if you're on the YouTube bot or whatever, then we'll figure out another way to post it to you. So yeah, definitely go and get your tickets. I believe there are still some left. So, but don't want to wait till last minute. Obviously, I really look forward to this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of people there. Sado and Henry are going to be there again. So we're going to have the whole casting team together. It's going to be really good, and we will have some really cool teams. So I don't know about how you feel about this. I think VP and Navi certainly are going to be back in that and thinking that they need to prove themselves. They need to show that this is for real.
There it is. I mean, last I remembered, yeah, it is going to be a stacked tournament.
Yeah, we've got Astralis and NIP and G2, Liquid, Mouse Sports, and SK2. This is an insane tournament, an absolutely insane tournament.
Wait, before I get ahead of myself, who's competing in the iBuyPower Cup? Because the odd thing here is that you have what, 2, 4,
8
6
teams.
It's going to be 12 teams total.
Yeah,
4 of those teams are coming from the iBuyPower Masters, which is happening the week before that, I believe.
Yeah, and as far as I can tell, that's Cloud9, Godsend, TSM, Renegades, FaZe, Echo Fox, Tyloo, and...
Tyloo going to wreck this shit.
You gotta hope so. That'd be very exciting. And I can't remember what I can't actually recognize the logo. Why am I so bad at this? Immortals, sorry. I'm retarded. So fair enough. Yes, Immortals is going to be the last one there. So and 4 of those teams, 4 of those 8 teams are going to join the other teams. And it will actually be crazy as fuck. It could, I mean, if we get like Godsend, FaZe, Cloud9, and either Tyloo or Immortals, not to necessarily just put the other teams down, but if we wanted to talk about like the optimal sort of team composition, that could obviously be very crazy. So, yeah, I think we have a good chance for a really fun tournament.
No, it's going to be stacked. It's definitely going to be stacked. I mean, you still have some solid competition here. I mean, I could definitely see Cloud9, Immortal. Well, yeah, I'd say it's going to have to be Godsend because by then they'll have had a little bit of time to get Lekro back into shape, with the rest of the team. Krim's obviously going back to Fnatic. That's one of the big pieces of news that broke as well on top of the whole Kerrigan-Glaive swap. But I could see a world in which Godsend, Tyloo, FaZe, and Immortals qualify, manage to make it through.
Yeah, I think that's definitely not unlikely. So either way, it'll be a mad tournament. I'm obviously very sad that Dignitas aren't going to be there just because it'd be hilarious to see them play again. But they do have
Sao Paulo.
They have Sao Paulo. They have E-League, I think, coming up right after that, where you and I are also going to be going.
Yeah.
In not that long, and it's basically like they have an incredible schedule, I think, for the rest of the year, more or less. So I don't blame them too much, but it would have been really fun to have them in Oakland as well. But regardless, we get a chance to see Glaive playing in there, so some of the Astralis questions we've just had, could maybe be answered. Yeah, I think it's gonna be tons of fun.
It is going to be a good time, and it's going to be in the Oracle as well, which is actually pretty sick. It's where they were having the NBA playoffs and everything, so it's a massive stadium, one of the better stadiums in the country. So it's the venue should be balls out, especially considering this seems like they're really going ham on it. $300,000 prize money, a League of Legends tournament as well. So pretty much like San Jose last year, where they're probably going to have like the 2 stages backing each other, and they'll have the whole stadium available, right, for seating. One half will be LoL, one half will be CS. So I'm imagining it's going to be like a similar setup. So I mean that it's got some potential. It's definitely got some potential. So
yeah,
if you're on the West Coast, definitely check out the site. Pop on by for a couple of days. You'll get to chill out and watch some good games.
Yeah, I think Tyloo also got like permanent visas, didn't they? For
Pretty sure,
America?
yeah.
So
or they got like the 10-year visas or something.
Yeah. I say permanent, obviously, but yeah, 10 years, something like that. So that would be very interesting to see if we could see them there. I certainly hope so. I love to see more Asian and Chinese teams playing in general. Should we do a quick peek into Pro League? Obviously, we have some of our Room on Fire boys joining there as well. So that's good news. I have to say this, just because there were some people who messaged me and said, how come you guys aren't there? Have you become too famous to show up for things like Pro League? Definitely not. I really wish I could have been there. First of all, I've never been to Brazil, but I was like way in the beginning when we found out that this was going to be in Brazil, I certainly thought I kind of have to go there because we have two really, really good Brazilian teams, and the Brazilian Counter-Strike scene, not just in Global Offensive, but going back to 1.6 has always been really, really passionate and really like people played 1.6 in Brazil like way into Global Offensive. Fallen was one of the people who didn't swap into Global Offensive until sort of fairly late because he was busy teaching people how to play 1.6 still, which is kind of crazy, but also really fun. So I really desperately wanted to go there. For me, it was a crazy, it's just a crazy schedule overall. For me to have gone there, it would have had to have been, I guess for you too, Sam, it would have been like, I'm trying to do the math in my head. It would have been something like 5 or 6 weeks straight, in a row without really being home. And
it would have been, yeah.
And given that we didn't do too much of the online season, I feel like it's better to then leave it to the people who actually have followed how the teams got there. Have kept up with the standings in the league and all that stuff. So that just sort of seemed more fair. But I have no doubt it's going to be crazy as hell. It's a little bit sad that Fnatic couldn't make it there, but I'm sure it'll be fine anyway. Dignitas are going to be there, and FaZe with who sort of recently managed to make it through E-League, right? With Carrigan on the lineup, and obviously both the Brazilian teams there, SK and Immortals. One thing I look forward to is seeing a Brazilian home crowd and how loud they're going to be. I really think it's going to be a fun tournament. So. Yeah. I look
Immortals and SK get up on that stage, I think it's going to be pretty batshit.
Right,
But then again, for their opponents, if you guys think that crowds in Europe or North America, have booed much in the past, watch a Brazilian football match, and then you'll understand the levels of derision that can be hit. Definitely expect some booing, some hissing, some catcalling when it comes to. When it comes to the opponents, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, we don't really get to see events in South America, big events at least, with international teams attending, right, that often. So it's going to be, a bit of a learning experience for everybody. But I mean, I think we can already give our hats off to the boys in Group A, because that group just got a whole lot easier.
It did. I mean, people were talking about the groups, especially. I think these groups a while ago didn't look too upsetting. FaZe maybe didn't look that dangerous, or a little bit, but not reliably so. And then Dignitas, who knew? And now when Dignitas won this event, you suddenly got NiP, SK, FaZe, Dignitas, Cloud9, and NRG in the same group. So that group definitely going to be a little bit rough, I would say, just a little bit.
No. Like, this is where I wonder if it isn't too late to just go for a reseed. But the problem is that I'm assuming that they seeded these groups based off of results in Pro League.
They did, yeah.
Which is just also silly.
That's how things work. I mean, that's obviously why it matters at the end of the day, right? But it is terrifying. There's no doubt about it. And just because I'm looking at the schedule now, and I remember Yanko was complaining about this. Our hearts obviously go out to the analysts who are going to be working. 9 best of ones, I think. Maybe now that Fnatic is out, it's going to be a bit less, but there are a lot of games here for the analysts and for Machine as well, who's the Danish host. So in that sense, casters have it so much easier. We just do a couple of games and then we get to relax and just chill for a long time. Analysts.
I see 10. No way. There's no way they're going to have to do simultaneous, or they're going to have a second stream. There's 10 games. 10 matches in Group A. That's without Fnatic. You go over to Group B, you add another 5 on there. So 15. There's no way they have to have 2 streams for this. Yeah, it's gonna have to be side by side broadcast, because there's no way that you can do 15 best of ones in a day back to back. I mean, you can Katowice. You can definitely go the distance and stay for 18 hours, but The question is, will you be saying anything that's that makes any sense by the end of the day? I highly doubt it. So.
Yeah. So, and I mean, obviously, with the time schedule and the time zone shift, you guys who are watching it are going to be hard pressed to stay up all night as well. But you should. You should obviously support it and tune in. That way, we can have even more tournaments in Brazil in the future. So that's definitely really cool. Also, we should give a shout out to the observers that are going to be no surprise, but it is going to be Heather and DJ who are doing it, Sapphire and Prize if you want. Really good at what their jobs and highly underestimated. I think people don't. It's been taught for a couple of times. People have talked about it, but the quality of the tournament and how good it feels and how happy people are with it is actually pretty tightly linked to how good the observers are. It really makes a big difference. Obviously, as a caster, I can't say that it's more important, but I almost want to say it's more important because I would even say this. That how good the commentary is depends also on how good the observers are, because it is really hard to cast something that you're not seeing. So just pay the observers more money, and hire good people and keep them around because they're worth it. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah, Sponge is there. Examinations, you're right. Oh my lord.
And I mean, I think Chad is a very funny person. I've always felt very bad for what sort of happened to Chad in his sort of professional career and the community in general. Because there was a time when everybody was on Sponge's side. Everyone just enjoyed him. He was always a funny character, and everyone liked the Renegade storyline. They go to LA and they live a different life, and they did the Australian hopefuls and all that stuff. And then it didn't work out the way they wanted to. It was almost like an Australian version of Astralis, or Astralis is a Danish version of Renegades, I guess. But regardless, it just didn't work out the way they wanted to. And I think at some point, Sponge felt like, look, I mean, criticism is fine and all, but I kind of want to just try and, I want at least to have my say as well and just be like, hey, there's a reason why some of these things are happening. And I didn't actually think he was being unreasonable with like how he was, but obviously eventually it sort of turned into a Sponge versus the community kind of thing, which was, I mean, partly funny, but also partly a little bit too much. As it happens, no, he's not the only person. But so then I always felt like I was worried actually that he would quit Counter-Strike altogether. I was worried that he would say, I am done with this. I can't deal with people complaining on Reddit and on Twitter and everything else, and that he was just going to skip out. So I'm really glad he didn't do that. Because I think he's really good at his job, so I hope he's gonna do just even more things. Yeah. But you always got to be careful, right? Whenever you're on social media, bad things can happen.
No, I remember calling him out at one point as well. But then he got 16-0 or something. So.
Yeah, and I mean that was the point. Obviously, that was funny because he literally had just said that they didn't feel like they'd served all the criticism, and then literally like 1 hour later they got 16-0 or something. I mean. But that obviously is hilarious, isn't it? Like you can't say anything about that. But I mean, I think the what happened started way earlier than that. So yeah, it happens to everybody. Like I mean, we're talking about other players who at least I think MSL has had a reputation for complaining on Twitter, and Pimp did it for a while too.
Yes.
If you do those things, then people are gonna come at you. So I don't mind. I think that's all right. I don't really mind that too much. I just hope people don't get, completely driven into the ground, which I'm glad Sponge didn't do. That was the main point here. I'm just happy that he's still around. So that's going to be exciting. It's a shame that he can't use the language that suits him the best for obvious reasons. There's a limit to what you can say on sponsored streams. There should be like a separate stream that was like Sponge unfiltered. Sponge having a cast. Maybe put Duncan on there as well. Just have a good time. I would like to see that.
I would like to see Duncan and Sponge on the desk together someday. Someday, Anders, we will get that.
Could dream about it, certainly. All right. I don't know. There's probably tons of things that we haven't covered. But I feel like it's going to get too long anyway. We're up to like an hour and a half almost, I think, on the broadcast time. So unless there's something that you really want to bring up, Selma, that we could do it. But otherwise, I think we're getting close to the end.
No, I think this is a good point as well. I think I need to go home and get some sleep.
That's a very, very, very good idea. I feel like, yeah.
Basically, again, my office chair that I thought was really comfortable is actually not comfortable to sleep in. So there you go.
At least you know that. You could write a review later on.
There you go, right? Angry review where you're misleadingly soft and comfy when you're just sitting, sleeping, however. Not quite. Oh, well. You live, you learn.
There we go. Yeah, well, thanks for watching, guys. Obviously, like the channel if you're watching this on YouTube. Go and subscribe to that. And follow us on social media and all the rest of it. And we'll see you guys very soon. The next thing we're going to be doing is E-League. So that's when you guys will be seeing us coming up the first 2 weeks of November. So stick around for that, definitely. And we'll be back with another episode of Status CS at some point in the future. I don't know if we're traveling next week, but we'll find a way to make it work, I'm sure.
We'll figure something out for sure.
All right.
Take care, everybody. Peace.